Wrap up. July. I read. How many books did I read? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 8 books, and 3 of them were rereads. So I read 5 books for the first time. All 3 rereads were in audio. There were no physical rereads. Instead of going chronological this time, we are going to get the rereads out of the way and then go least favorite to favorite. So I reread The Lines of Our Song. It was awesome. For more further thoughts, please reference the first or second time I previously read The Lines of Our Song. I think it's my third favorite Guy Gavriel Kay book. I think the last chapter, not the epilogue, but the last actual chapter might be my favorite Guy Gavriel chapter. It's also one of my favorite starts. I do think there's like a middle 2 chapters that are slightly less incredible than the rest of the book. It's still a 9.5 out of 10. It's Kay. I've talked about Kay enough. We're going to move on to another one of my favorite authors who I talk about much less, because he's only written 2 books, and I read them a lot longer ago. They're very different. And I reread The Rage of Dragons and The Fires of Vengeance by Evan Winter. I did both of these on audio. Pretty damn good audiobook narrator. I was saying the only thing holding me back from liking the audio, I still did like it more physically, and I think I might have liked the audio as much if they just had a full cast for when they did the Where We Fight the World Burns, but instead it's one person. In the past, I've described this as fantasy John Wick. I've now decided there's a much better comparison. You guys know the Tom Cruise action movie Live, Die, Repeat, where it's like alien invasion version of D-Day? This is the fantasy version of that. Legitimately one of the most addicting books that I've read. This is the third time I've read Rage of Dragons and the second time I've read Fires of Vengeance. And it took this third time for me to actually feel good about the fact that I do like the Rage of Dragons more. Last time I read Fires of Vengeance and I was like, I think this is better than Rage of Dragons and I like it slightly less. And I still think that's true. I think Fires of Vengeance has better character writing. I think it's more morally interesting. I think the world building is better. But I enjoy The Rage of Dragons more just because there's a certain plot element that I find completely addicting. I think it's a slightly more cohesive narrative in terms of the story and the main character's arc. I think a lot of this is one of those I see criticisms of it and that are just factually wrong, an incredibly frustrating amount. I think it's a pretty internally consistent novel, and is generally very well thought out. And probably I'm of the position that if people think there are glaring plot holes on here, that they're just wrong, and those are explained. There's actually some things that are kind of baffling to me, because they're almost if people were complaining that they were over-explained, I would see where they were coming from, but then they're complaining that this isn't explained at all, and I'm like, okay, but it was 11 times actually. So I get that you could have missed it 10 times, but the 11th, it's not exactly a challenging book. Anyway, this book is so addicting that I was rereading it on audio in the workout background. I started it on Friday, and over the weekend, I was kind of excited to go to work because I knew I'd get to listen to Rage of Dragons all day. That's the level of addicting we're dealing with here. Anyway, Rage of Dragons, Fires of Vengeance, they're awesome. They're not exactly as highbrow as Our Song or the next 2 books I'm gonna go, but they're kind of the outlier books among my favorites, and the same with the movie that I'm saying they're fantasy. Live, Die, Repeat, because that movie is a little bit of an outlier, because I love that movie. Anyway, then those are the rereads. New reads. My least favorite book of the month was Never Let Me Go. I'm bringing up the name of the author right now, so I apologize if I say it wrong. It's a famous author, very well-known one. Ishiguro, yeah. So Never Let Me Go is a sci-fi novel. Whatever. I'm not going to say what it's about because the premise is kind of a spoiler. I didn't really like it. I think it has a very conversational melancholy tone. And I think for the people who it works, it's very like melancholy and rambling, and then the way it all kind of like falls together ends up hitting very impactfully from an emotional standpoint. Like, it's not sad because of some tragic moment. Like, it's not like a traditional tragedy that you'd expect from like a Shakespearean one where there's like a moment that causes the tragedy. It's just kind of like slowly sad, and then it's like, yep, that was sad. I almost felt that emotion. Like, for the moment that I think you're supposed to get to, and it's like, yep, the melancholy. I was like, I guess, yeah, that's a little bit sad. And I think a lot of people get really wrapped up in the character. I just didn't find the character's story or style to be particularly interesting at all for 2/3 of the book. So I would say that held back my enjoyment a little bit. The style is kind of like, I mean, I say this descriptively, it sounds like an insult, but it's just me trying to describe it for people who haven't read it. Think of if someone is like telling you a story and they're like recounting it, and they're recounting it like kind of badly. Like, they keep forgetting where they were going, and then they backtrack and go like, anyway, so as I was saying, blah, 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 blah. I know this because this is how I tell stories, because I'm bad at it. It's like from the point of view of someone telling a story like that, which, like, it clearly isn't a mistake. Like, it's really intentionally written that way. I don't get it. Like, I don't really get the appeal. I'm just kind of like, this is just like, why are you telling this story badly on purpose? It's very confusing to me. And then I find like the concept and what the book's about from the sci-fi perspective to be quite interesting. This is very much not an ideas book. It has this like sci-fi idea, and it's going to mostly be about this specific groups of characters. And there's really only like 3 characters in this book who are like actually developed characters. And I mean, I just don't think they're that interesting, like, at all to me. Obviously, some people enjoy them. It's a book that I think it won awards. I just like these characters are kind of standard. They have a very interesting premise, and all the things that are interesting about them is that they are that premise. I don't know if I could tell you like an aspect of their personality that would make them a unique example of this, because I feel like a lot of people in this world would follow this premise, and like they would have all these like unique social psychologies as well as this joint social psychologies, and like the 3 characters are distinct from each other, but I just don't think they're distinct in ways I found interesting until part 3. Part 3 was my favorite of the 3 parts by far, because the first 2 parts are kind of like when they're younger, and I'm kind of like, this is just about high school drama. Like, why am I just like, all right. And then like part 3, I feel like, is what the book is about. Anyway, I've talked a long time about this book that I didn't really like. 4.4 out of 10. Book club books, they were trending up and they're trending back down. I also read another book club book, which was The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri, which I thought was pretty good. It had a lot of point of views, and I think that ends up being my main criticism of it, is that I don't know if it justified those point of views. It's a reasonably short book by fantasy standards, and it has, I think, a comparable amount of point of views to like a Game of Thrones while being shorter, and a lot of like the ones like that work, like a Game of Thrones, is because George is like an immensely efficient character writer. Like, he can have a character with like 2 lines of dialogue and 1 action, and you kind of get an idea of who they are. And it's the idea of like a reasonably nuanced character. And I just don't know if this author was able to be efficient enough in characterization to have this large of a cast of characters. So I think the main 2 characters were pretty interesting, and they had a pretty interesting dynamic. And then there was like 1.5 other characters where I'm like, that point of view is kind of justified. And then after that, it was like, as a random example, and I'm going to phrase this in a way so it's not a spoiler. At some point, a person in this book, like a minor character, dies. And you get the sense after that this minor character was supposed to have been like really good friends with this other character, and I think I'm supposed to feel like emotional over the loss from this friendship, and my reaction was like, wait, they were friends? I mean, I guess they were. Yeah. That's unfortunate. Instead of like, that's not the reaction I think the author wanted there. World building stuff was really cool. There was really cool like this like disease where it's almost like body horror with like plants growing inside people. That's kind of screwed up and written well. The writing I thought was pretty smooth. It was almost like it was very easy to read. Like it was not dense at all. To the point where like there were some of those where I have to like make sure I actually like read every word and sub-vocalize and don't just like glide my eyes across the page and get the general meaning, because it's like it's smooth enough that I could have done that. So anyway, I gave it a 6.7 out of 10. Next up, The Kite Runner. This is one of my mom's favorite books. I read it. I thought it was quite good. But a weird good, because my range on the score that this could end up settling on is very wide. Like, there's some books that when I read them, I give them a score, but I'm like, I don't really know if that's right. And some of these in the past, that's resulted in them going up. Like, I had this feeling about The Princess Bride, and I think I've gotten higher on it. I had this feeling about Assassin's Apprentice that I've just gotten a wee bit higher on. I had this feeling about, like, Lord of the Rings. I also had this feeling about, like, This Is How You'd Lose the Time War, which I've got lower on, and some other ones that I've gotten lower on. So it's a mixed bag. I think the main character is a very interesting character who is at times extremely unlikable, but intentionally so. And I think his main relationships that this book is largely about are interesting and emotionally compelling. I think this book is also one of the most overtly emotionally manipulative books that I've ever read. Where, like, obviously the author is trying to manipulate our emotions. That's, like, their goal. But I think we all, or for the most part, we agree that we don't want to feel like they're trying to manipulate our emotions. We want to feel like they're just being like, this is what happened. Sam and Frodo had to part as Frodo returned to Valinor. It's very sad. It doesn't feel like Tolkien was just like, and now I'm going to try and make them sad. It's like Tolkien was just telling me what happened to Frodo. And then it was very, very bittersweet. This, it felt like on numerous occasions, I was just like, oh, this author is just doing their absolute best to make this as sad as possible. And sometimes it led to what I would consider, sometimes he veered into plot hole in order to accomplish this. And I think he also ended up making this either second or third most important character in this book. Like, this I actually was comparing it to Lord of the Rings, because it's kind of got the Frodo and Sam thing going on, but if Frodo was like kind of a total dick. And the version of Sam in this is like so overly completely pure that it felt like it was just set up so I would be as sad as possible when bad things happen to him. Also, like, there's a main like female character in this book who is completely just there. So that sounded like a lot of complaining, but like, it was for a lot of it successful at manipulating my emotions, because it was a very emotionally compelling book. So I gave it an 8 out of 10, but like, that could drop to like a 6 or up to a 9 in the future. Probably not a 6. No, 6 is too low. It has too much in the strengths to be that low. Anyways, and then I'm going to include the last two together, because they were 1 and 2. Granted, they were pretty far apart. And that's The Will to Battle and Seven Surrenders. I'm going to talk about them chronologically, not in order of how much I like them, which means I'm talking about Seven Surrenders first, even though I liked it a lot more than The Will to Battle. I quite like The Will to Battle, but I loved Seven Surrenders. I thought Seven Surrenders was genius. I said, if you look at like me talking about Two Like the Lightning, I said that like on the micro level, I enjoyed almost every scene, but for a lot of scenes, I was kind of like, where is this going? Is this like, how does this connect to the main picture? And I thought Seven Surrenders was even better on the micro scene level, and then also was just like a much more tight, focused story where like the macro story came together so well. There's like just the level of like the amount of interesting things going on per sentence is just off the charts. The like world building and theme and commentary is insane, but also there's just like some truly powerful writing and moments in this that it was a much more emotional read than Two Like the Lightning was, while being even more interesting on like the micro level scene by scene to me, and also feeling like I knew where I was going a lot more and knew the right questions to ask. Especially for like the political intrigue. There's a lot of focus on it in Two Like the Lightning where I was kind of like, you know, where is it going? So I gave that 9.5 out of 10, which is defined on my Goodreads as one of my favorite books of all time. It might be my favorite sci-fi novel. It's a three-way competition between this, Demon in White by Christopher Rocchio, and Memory. Four-way competition, actually. It could also be Mere Dance by Lois McMaster Bujold. I was incredibly good. Then I also read The Will to Battle, which I liked a good bit less, but still thought it was excellent. I just don't think enough happened in this. But the last 100 pages kind of saved it. But I think 200 and something pages into this, I kind of felt like we were kind of in this. You know what this was? This was season 2 of House of the Dragon. That's what it was. There was a lot of really good stuff, but I kind of feel like at the start and near the end of this that from a grand perspective, we were kind of in a very similar position. So yeah, I mean, it kind of was, it was the setup book and Perhaps the Stars is the payoff book, and I'm reading Perhaps the Stars and, there be payoff. So I think I gave it an 8.3. Because again, it's just like all the 8.5. There was like a chapter or two that I didn't enjoy as much, but it still has all the amazingly intricate world building and larger than life characters. So it couldn't drop. It still ended up really liking it. Which, House of the Dragon season 2. So anyway, that was my July. Let me know if you've read any of these, or if they're on your list. Have a nice day, everyone.